following is a paid program, and the views expressed do not necessarily represent the opinions of the management of this station, and the views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, and callers of this program are solely their own. They do not represent or reflect the views, policies, or official position of ACA, its affiliates, or its staff. ACA does not endorse any statements made during this broadcast. This is 1 in 31 Autism Today, a presentation from Anderson Center for Autism. 1 in 31 Autism Today is a weekly show devoted to autism spectrum disorder.
Good morning and welcome to 1 in 31 Autism Today, the podcast on topics related to autism spectrum disorder. I'm your host, Eliza Bozensky, Chief Development Officer with Anderson Foundation for Autism. And on behalf of Anderson Center for Autism and Anderson Foundation for Autism, I want to welcome our guest today, Michael Gilberg, attorney at law and a repeat guest. It's nice to have you on the show again, Michael.
Thanks, Eliza. It's good to be here again. It's been a couple of years.
It has. I was looking back, I think, because on your website, which I do appreciate, you still have those older links to our initial podcast, and it was like 2016 and 2018. So it's
been a while. I've got to update my website, though, anyways.
But you've done a lot, and
on my to-do list.
I'm familiarizing myself with you and your work and your story, your bio. So today we're going to talk about all things related to kind of what's new and important for families raising children with special needs, right? To know about within the special education law, the rights that I love on your website. It's very clear disability rights are civil rights. That's kind of going to be the focus, I think. But for the beginning, let me turn it over to you. And Michael, if you could just refresh our audience, tell us about yourself and how you got to where you're doing today.
I grew up with undiagnosed Asperger's. I was one of those kids in the 1980s, back when everybody thought autism was just kids sitting in the corner banging their head against a wall, and you couldn't be verbal or high intellect and be autistic. And they misdiagnosed me, put me in special ed. It was, again, as I always say, all the wrong programs. And then when I finally got to college, I kind of caught myself up, even though I didn't get the appropriate education, and I became a special ed attorney representing children in special ed who are not getting appropriate services, as I always say, to avoid going through some of the challenges I went through, because under the IDEA, everybody is entitled to a free and appropriate public education. I serve on the National Board of COPA, which is the National Professional Organization for Special Ed Attorneys, and involved with numerous autism organizations, including the Autism Society of America. I'm on their self-advocacy board, and I've been working with helping locally to restart the Autism Society of the Greater Hudson with Tracy Schober, your former colleague.
Yes, that's a great organization, and I'm glad that you're working on that with her. And it's good to hear that you're staying connected locally. But I know I read something on your website about your story, and it was interesting that you pointed out that, because I have the same experience. I talk to a lot of parents of children with autism and other neurodivergent diagnoses, and a lot of times parents are telling me how their career shifted, or how they decided to write a book or start a program or get into a certain line of work because they were raising their child with special needs. You yourself make the distinction that you did that because of your own experience. So I want to ask you, were you always interested in law as a long-term goal, and then it became special education law, or was it all in one that you just decided this is what I need to do?
Well, when I was 8 years old, my mother thought I should be a lawyer, but she'll still tell you to this day that she knew at 8 years old. But I didn't know what I wanted to do. I mean, again, I grew up without getting the appropriate education, so I never really thought about it in that way. You know, I joked that when I was 11, I wanted to be third baseman for the Mets, and then I realized, when I was 13, then I realized that wasn't a realistic goal. I'm not the most athletic or coordinated person. But that aside, I got to college and I went to grad school in psychology, thought I wanted to do that, hated it, dropped out around 9/11 because family issues and some other stuff. And then I realized law was the right answer. And I always hoped for special ed law. I looked at some other areas of law depending on, where there were jobs. But then things worked out and I ended up getting into special ed law, which was always something in my mind that I wanted to do.
So do you find yourself, well, first of all, I think your desire to play third base for the Mets is something that a lot of people can connect to, regardless of whether it was realistic or not. Everybody, I think, goes through that phase. But I'm curious, how often is it on like a daily basis when you're working that you pull from your own personal experience? Is it that close to you in terms of how you're thinking about working with your clients or, writing documentation or doing research or being, working with other colleagues in the law? Like, are you pulling from that personal experience that you went through like all the time? Or has it kind of faded and you're now pulling from experiences you've had as a professional?
I think it's both. I think it's not as simple as one or the other.
Mhm.
I think it's not, it's not so much one or the other. I think it depends on the circumstance, depends on the situation.
Yeah.
It's not so simple as to say, I pull from one or the other on a daily basis. I
But
think it
you,
depends on the situation because I represent kids who are autistic who I can relate to, and I represent kids who I can't relate to who have intellectual disabilities or learning disabilities that are not the experience I had.
does that bring you a sense of satisfaction or happiness when you're interacting directly with the kids that you're representing? Do
Well,
you, do you,
I don't often interact with the children because it's, dealing with the parents, unless it's a rare case. Like I had a case this week, autistic girl, 14, very above average intelligence, twice exceptional. And we went to hearing in New York and I had her testify. So I've gotten to get to know her a little bit. But she's a gifted child of an age that I can do this and have her testify on her own behalf.
so the voices, and this, I'm curious about this too, from your personal experience, whether you're getting it through the families or getting it through written testimony or having somebody advocate on their own behalf, is the voice of the child very important to you in your work? Is that something that you felt was over? It
Absolutely.
sounds
But
like
I think
it's
it
something that was
depends.
overlooked for you.
It was overlooked for him, and it depends again on the child. Child has to be of a certain age. I mean, I'm not going to have a 5-year-old at a hearing, or they have to be of a certain intellectual capability. Some of these parents I've spoken to don't feel their children have the ability to testify, that they
Hmm.
wouldn't be able to handle it. This girl was able to handle it. She
Hmm.
was intellectually capable of understanding what was going on. As her mother said when she asked, was she upset about the way the school district attorney was questioning her? She said, no, because I knew what she was doing. She's smart enough to know what was necessary. She's smart enough to know how the game is played, but not every kid is going to be able to fit into that box.
A lot of pressure. Understood.
Again,
So
I
what?
think the kids generally have to be 11 or 12 or older. They have to have a certain intellectual ability to understand that, I don't want to put a kid on the stand who's going to say something that hurts themselves. So it's hard. It's hard because many of these kids don't have that ability. It's just in some cases you get a kid who does have that ability.
You have to be flexible.
Right. And that's really what I find in the whole thing is that, it depends on the child. There's no universal rules.
So, is there a specific age range that you typically represent, or is it all sort of K through 12,
Well, K
anywhere
through
in that?
12, three to 21.
3 to 21, all the way. Okay. So
Yeah.
I had a quick question about that. We talked about this off air. When I first started at Anderson, which I've been here now 20 years, for a large part of that time, students technically aged out of our school program, and we're a residential program mostly, at age 21. But and now in New York, and I think it's rolling out in several other states, the state education departments, I think, are pushing out a 22 aging out age, I guess. So is there any implication there? I figured we would at least make sure people know that, but is there any implication or any rationale you can provide as to why something, it seems like a pretty basic
It's
change,
a
but what's
COVID
the
thing.
COVID thing? Oh, to
Yeah,
make up for the loss of
makes up for the lost time. A lot of kids lost education due to COVID. So especially kids who turned 21 during COVID, they want to make sure they get that last year and services. I mean, it's been done a little bit, but I'd say phasing out as we're getting further from COVID. People were doing it for a couple years after COVID, but the further we get from COVID, the less of a thing it's becoming.
Do you ever anticipate it going back to age 21?
I think in general, it will go back to 21. I think this was again what I would call a COVID effect. And
Okay,
the,
interesting. I'm
and the,
not
fir-
used to I'm not used to state agencies and government agencies rolling back things, but maybe we'll see that change back.
I think a lot of it's going to be temporary related to COVID. I think the further we get from COVID, the more it's going to disappear because school districts don't want to have to pay for an extra year.
Yes, I have that I get. Okay. All right. right. So we just have about 2 minutes left in the first half of our interview. In those 2 minutes, can you give us a quick overview of like the main or a couple of the bigger issues that you find yourself working on with families right now?
Sure. I mean, I think one of the big issues is it's always about money and parents having the opportunity to get what their kids need, but
Mhm.
districts feeling the squeeze financially. And we'll talk about it, I think, after the break. But obviously, one of the things that's been in the news without getting political is the discussion of abolishing the Department of Education. And what does that mean for special education? And what does that mean for students? And I think that's been something a lot of parents I find have questions about. How does this affect me? How does this affect my child?
I think that's a good thing to get into. I agree. We'll try to keep the politics out of it and just focus on what would be the realities without, special education and impact on state education. But in the meantime, just in the last couple of seconds here, before we go to break, overall, are you finding families recognizing more and more? Are we still on the right track of families recognizing that their child has the right to a free and appropriate education? Because, go ahead.
In general, yes. I think there's always going to be families who, as I put it, don't necessarily understand it. There's always going to be those families who will say, oh, I don't want the stigma of my child having this or having this diagnosis. But generally speaking, those families are not finding their way to me. The families that are going to be that are going to be coming to me are families who have already made the decision that they want to pursue what they feel their child is entitled to.
Good. I know that a lot of things in the autism community, but a lot of things having to do with just access to services have been on, generally speaking, a positive trend for many years now, of just more and more awareness and understanding that there are rights that individuals with disabilities have. And we want to always use this platform on the podcast to also make sure people are as aware of that as possible, so that they can, if they choose to, they can access those supports and services. On that note, we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to come right back with Michael Gilberg, attorney at law.
Stand Up to Cancer asked leading cancer researchers to speak about why they do their work.
Two words come to mind for me. One is responsibility, the other is purpose.
It's just so inspiring to do research that impacts human lives.
Stand Up to Cancer has been a critical partner in advancing research for cancer.
Cancer research saves lives.
So please help us fight in this battle against cancer.
Be a part of the team that ends cancer at standuptocancer.org.
What are you doing out there?
Come on!
I saw you at the game the other night. Yeah, you. Up there getting mad, acting like we're all out there making $1 million a game. But let me be real with you. This isn't the pros. It's school sports, and it's a game, our game. So please, let us play.
School sports fans, remember, when you cheer for your team, make noise for the right reasons. This message presented by the NFHS and the NIAAA.
And all student athletes in New York.
And now, 1 in 31, Autism Today continues on Fox Oldies 98.9. This is a weekly community affairs presentation from the Anderson Center for Autism.
Welcome back to 1 in 31, Autism Today. We're talking with Michael Gilberg, attorney at law, special education attorney out of New York. And Michael, you've been on the show before. We always have a good talk about just what families need to know and what kind of services you provide. And you've got both a personal and a professional connection, obviously, which I think comes together beautifully in terms of your passion for what you do and just how you value the services you provide. We are now going to jump into sort of the big elephant in the room, I guess, which is the possible. Well, you go ahead and put it out there. What are you hearing, and how would it affect families and individuals?
Well, there's a lot of discussion out there, as I'm sure you've heard about. It's all over about what does it mean to abolish the Department of Education, and what does that mean for families of children with disabilities? And a lot of families are scared. It's become, as I said, we were saying before, a political hot potato, so to speak. It's a political issue, but it's also a practical issue for families. Mm-hmm. And the truth is, we don't fully know because it hasn't it's again politically controversial, but from what I see, the biggest challenge is the IDEA is not going anywhere. As far as we can tell, it's not going to, there's been some discussion about opening it up and reassessing parts of it. But a lot of, on the COPA, which I'm on the board of, which is the National Professional Organization of Attorneys and Advocates representing parents in special ed, we don't want to open up the IDEA right now, because when you open it up, you don't know what's going to come as a result. There could be positives or negatives to opening it up. It could, people could add bad language that we don't want. That being said, the IDEA right now is still law. The government still has to implement it. And so the question is, what does potentially abolishing the Department of Education mean for that? Well, they've talked about transferring some of the functions to HHS, which is problematic because they don't have as we believe in COPA, the expertise on special education at HHS that they have at the Department of Education to do what is necessary for these children. The other concern is that without a Department of Education, you're not going to have that level of federal oversight. If a family needs to come to the federal government and says, this district and the state are not doing what I need for my child, fix it, that you don't get that same level of oversight if you don't get that same level of oversight if there's no Department of Education. It leaves the state Department of Education kind of as the last place. And if the state doesn't do the right thing, there's nobody above them to say, hey, change this, unless the family can sue in federal court, which is an incredibly expensive proposition.
Okay. So some of the practical sort of protections for families and individuals who in special education programs could be affected. What you said about transferring some of the functions to HHS, that's interesting, because what you said also in connection to that would be the possibility of losing some of those special education expertise that exists.
The expertise that exists in the federal government
under DOA.
Through the people who have the policy background in this area.
Yeah. So are you seeing families or advocates come to you with questions about this specifically? Or is it something that you're like, how would you describe yourself as kind of being prepared for all of this if it was to change?
I don't think anyone's prepared. I mean, I'm aware of this because of my role in COPA, as I said, as a board member and as somebody who's involved in the community. But I don't think the average family is thinking about this per se. I've had a couple of questions here or there, but nothing has happened right now. But I think the only thing is that families, if they want to go to the federal government right now for redress of something that they feel their district or their state Department of Ed has not done properly, they're not getting anywhere because the Department of Education has had so much staff laid off that at this point there's nobody there to help these families if they go to the Department of Ed to say, hey, this is what's going on. But other than that, I think that the families aren't seeing the effects yet, but it doesn't mean they're not going to see the effects.
And like anything else, it could be very slow moving, and it could change direction, and certain things could end up getting protected. I mean, it's really about maybe being aware of what we don't know. So
and we always say this is a bipartisan issue. It should be bipartisan. It shouldn't be seen as a partisan issue. People have children with autism, whether they're Democrats, Republicans, Independents, or anything else.
Yeah.
There's there's all this controversy now about what causes autism, but the truth is anybody could have a child with autism. And again, you don't know how serious the autism is going to be, whether you're going to have a child with, like myself and people I know, or you're going to have what they call profound autism.
Right, who are much more along the lines of the folks that we serve here at Anderson. So, and the needs are different, and the educational individual needs are different, but the overall, free and appropriate education is phrased that way for a reason. It's because every person is supposed to have access to an education that is appropriate for their
individual needs,
the ways that they need to learn, right?
Their individual needs, exactly. And the problem is that you get in many cases children who people will say, well, this child isn't educable, they can't be educated. And
how do you feel about that?
I'm sorry?
How do you feel about that if you hear that?
I think any child can be educated. You just have to know how to educate them and within what system. People told my mother to throw me away, that I'd never graduate high school, even though I was always very bright. And well, I'm a lawyer now, so clearly they were wrong.
Clearly they were wrong. Plus, who in their right mind is telling a parent to throw away their child?
A social worker I had in sixth grade, but unfortunately, as I've probably told this story before, I looked him up years ago with the internet. You can find anyone now, but he passed away, so I didn't have a chance to tell him he was wrong.
Well, you living your life, I think, is doing the right thing on that regard. But no, I mean, I think I think we can get into that a little bit just because there's an importance anytime I'm having a conversation with anyone on this podcast to reinforce for any families who are listening that that there are rights and then there's your gut feeling as a parent, all of which should be taken into strong account, especially when working on any services that are needed or would benefit your child. So there's always going to be controversy. There's always going to be issues. Money, certainly funding comes into play in a lot of them. But I think it's important to have people such as yourself out there practicing your craft and your career in a way that is helping and supporting people who otherwise maybe have a voice, but maybe their voice is a little more muted than someone else's. So I think it's really wonderful what you're doing. What do you see as, I mean, you've been doing this, how many years now, Michael, have you been practicing?
Special ed attorney, 15 years.
Wow.
And I
And
graduated
you have
law
any to
school.
keep going for another 15, 20 years? What's your plan?
Well, I'm too young to retire, so I don't have the money for that. So I mean, I graduated law school. This year it's going to be 19 years since I graduated law school. So time just seems to move on. So, that's my plan. I mean, look, no one knows what the future holds. I think, the lesson of the past few years is nobody knows what the future holds.
Clearly not. And things can look one way one day and completely differently the next. So,
we've lived through so many things in our lifetime that I never would have imagined. I don't think I ever thought about a global pandemic.
No, I don't think that was on anybody's bingo card, as they say.
I said to my mother a couple days ago that, and I was 23 at the time, I still can't believe 9/11 happened. It's one of those things that you think about looking back and you still I actually still can't believe that happened.
And for many of us, that day is really fresh when we think back to it.
Right. So I think that my point being, I don't think any of us know what the future holds or how the world is going to change.
Yeah. However, what would you say to somebody who's contemplating, maybe they're getting ready to graduate undergraduate school or they're starting interest in law school? What would you say to somebody who might be contemplating getting into special education law?
It's a very rewarding field of law. You help people. It's not the kind of law where people think, oh, lawyers are just horrible people and they're doing horrible things. They're out there just making money. You don't make a ton of money compared to other fields of law, but you do good things.
Okay, so you can sleep well at night, which is important.
I guess to some extent.
I guess it's all relative. Let me throw out a little bit of information about you so people know where to go to get more info and contact you. You have a great website, very informative. Michael Gilberg, ESQ for Esquire.com. No spaces. That's Michael Gilberg, Esquire.com. We'll put that all when we share this podcast. We'll put all your contact information in there. There's a really easy way to send a message to you, Michael. So it's really first page pops up and you can just reach out to you. Looks like a free consultation. Is there anything else you want to say about, somebody who might need your services? Are you pretty quick about returning, emails?
Yeah, I'm very quick, unfortunately.
Okay.
Which is a blessing and a curse in some ways.
Well, I think for the person who might have been leading up to this and maybe hesitant for a while, it's probably really helpful for them when they reach out and they hear back right away from somebody who can help.
Absolutely. My goal is to make legal services, as I always say, my goal is to make legal services affordable to people while earning a living. Nobody gets to be, we all have to earn a living, but I want families to be able to access legal services. And it's not always the easiest thing in the world for parents to put money together.
Right. I mean, exactly. And money, time, but having expertise, especially as things get a little trickier for them through the process and for their child, really important. So, Michael, it's been really great to catch up with you. I can't believe it's been so long. We'll have to do it again a little sooner.
Yeah, absolutely. But let's not wait so long.
No, let's not. Certainly not 8 years. But I really thank you for everything that you're doing. And thank you for helping to shed light on, all of this conversation around Department of Education and what might happen. So folks, stay tuned. read up, be aware, and like Michael said before, be aware of what you don't know, and that things are, potentially always going to change, and it's always good to be knowledgeable. Michael Gilberg, again, your website is michaelgilbergesq.com. We'll put all that out when we share this podcast, and thank you as always for being on the show.
Thank you again, Eliza. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome. This is 1 in 31 Autism Today, the podcast on topics related to autism spectrum disorder. I'm your host, Eliza Bozensky, and remember, Anderson cares.
You've been listening to 1 in 31 Autism Today, a weekly presentation from Anderson Center for Autism. Join them for another edition of the show next weekend.